You have to understand the silence first, because the silence is where it began to go wrong. I am a reckoner of the Vorhalu. For 140 years I have stood at the right hand of kings and counted the dead. It is a sacred office. When a war is declared, I carry the tally scroll. When the last weapon falls still, I unroll it, I read the names of the fallen on both sides, I speak the closing words, and the war is over. Clean, finished, sealed by witness. This is how it has always been done. This is how it was done for 4,000 years. So you can imagine me on the command deck of our flagship, high above the human world they called Tessely Reach, the scroll already in my hands, the closing rite already prepared in my throat. I expected to use it within a day. Below us turned a soft green planet of grain terraces and silver irrigation canals and small, sleeping farming towns. It was, I thought, almost insultingly easy. A coming-of-age war for a young heir. A gentle little world. A clean contract. And then we waited for the challenge song to be answered. In every proper war, the challenged party raises their banners and sings their defiance back across the void, and the contract is sealed in sound. We had sung our declaration in the old way, the long, mournful tones that have opened every Vorhalu war since before your species learned to write. We waited for the answer. It did not come. There was no defiance, no banners, no song. Down on that quiet green world the lights of the little town simply stayed on, and the farmers, we later learned, went on watering their terraces, and a single human voice came up to us on an open channel, calm as still water, and said only that they accepted, and that we should come down, and that we should bring our king. My hands began to shake around the scroll. I did not know why then. I know now. Part 2. I am leaving this account on the record because someone must, and because no one else who stood beside the king will speak of it. They have all chosen silence. I have chosen the older duty. A reckoner does not look away from what happened. That is the entire point of a reckoner. So here is the question I have carried for the rest of my life, the question that has unmade everything I believed about war. Why could I not close the rite? Understand that I tried. I will tell you how many times I tried. I will tell you exactly when, and exactly who stopped me, and exactly what they made me look at instead. By the end you will know what I know, which is that the humans of Tessely Reach did not defeat our fleet. They did something for which our language has no word, and which our 4,000 years of glory left us utterly defenseless against. They would not let the war end. I had spent my whole life believing that the most fearsome thing one people could do to another was kill them in great numbers under the open sky. I was wrong, and a human woman with tired eyes taught me how wrong, and she never once raised her voice to do it. Her name was Ruth Adami. I am told that among humans it was not a remarkable name. To me, it is the most terrible name I know. Part 3. Let me tell you what a Vorhalu war was, so you can feel the weight of what was taken from us. For 4,000 years we made war the way other peoples make music. It had movements. It had rules so old they had become beautiful. A king who wished to prove an heir or settle a grievance or simply remind the galaxy of his strength would issue the formal challenge. The challenged world would answer. Both sides would meet at the agreed place and they would fight, and yes, soldiers would die, because death was the seriousness that made the thing real. And when enough had fallen to satisfy honor, the losing side would lower its banners, and the reckoner, I, or one like me, would step forward and read the tally aloud. Every name, ours and theirs. And in the reading the dead were given their meaning, and the war was sealed shut like a tomb, and everyone went home. It was clean. Do you understand what I am telling you? In 4,000 years no Vorhalu ever stood in the ruin of what he had made. We declared, we fought, we counted, we left. The aftermath was not ours to hold. The tally closed the door. We never walked back through it. King Bzl believed in all of this the way you believe in the ground beneath your feet. He was not cruel. I want that understood because it matters to everything that followed. He was a confident traditionalist who loved his son and wished to give the boy a proper war, a small honorable one against a soft target, so the heir might one day read his own first tally and become a man in the eyes of the people. Tessely Reach was chosen precisely because it was gentle. Farmers. Grain. No fortress worlds, no war fleets, no glory-hungry princes. An easy right, a clean win. The king looked down at that green and quiet planet, and he was so certain. I stood beside him with the scroll. I was certain too. That is the last moment of my life in which I understood the universe. Part 4. I will rewind us now to the morning the war was formally accepted, because the trap was already closing and we could not see its shape. We descended under flag of parley to seal the contract face to face, as the old form requires. The king came in his full ceremonial array, his heir at his side, 12 guards and me. We expected to be met by generals. We were met, instead, by a woman in a plain gray coat standing in a field of cut wheat, with a handful of unarmed people behind her, and not one banner anywhere in sight. Commander Ruth Adami. She did not sing. She did not boast. She looked at our king the way one looks at weather that is coming whether you like it or not, and she said that humanity accepted the war he had declared. The king was pleased. The form was being honored, if strangely. And then she added the condition. "We accept," she said, "but you stay until it's finished, properly finished, you and your king all the way to the end." The king laughed gently, the way one laughs at a child who has misunderstood a rule. Of course he would stay until the end, he told her. He would stay until the tally was read. That was the end. That was always the end. She did not laugh back. She looked at him for a long moment, and then at me, at the scroll under my arm, and something passed across her tired face that I did not have a name for then, and have spent a century learning to name since. It was not fear. It was not hatred. It was something closer to grief held in advance, the look of a person who already knows the shape of a thing she is going to have to do. "No," she said quietly, "not that end, the real one." I felt my hands begin to shake again. I told myself it was the cold. Part 5. Then came the war itself. And the war itself is where I first understood that something was deeply, structurally wrong with these people. We fought them in the high country and across the irrigation plains and in the orbital lanes above the southern terraces. And we won. I must be precise about this because everything turns on it. We won the battles. Almost all of them. The humans were outgunned and they knew it, and they did not pretend otherwise. But they fought like no enemy in 4,000 years had ever fought. They fought to stop us, not to destroy us. Where our doctrine called for the killing blow, theirs called for the disabling one. They shot out our engines and let our crews live. They breached our hulls and then sent their own medics across to treat the wounded they had just made. When a wing of our fighters went down over the wheat plains, the humans pulled our pilots from the wreckage before the fires reached them, and bound their wounds, and did not even take their weapons until afterward, almost as an afterthought, almost embarrassed. Where was the slaughter? Where was the glory? I stood on the command deck and watched the engagements, and I could not make the shape of them fit anything I knew. A war is supposed to produce a great clean heap of the dead on both sides so that the tally has weight, so that the reading means something. These humans kept refusing to make the heap. They kept sparing. They kept catching the ones who fell. They turned battle into something that looked horribly, unbearably like rescue. The king grew uneasy. The heir grew confused. And I gripped my scroll and waited for the moment when enough had fallen that I could step forward and read the names and close the door, because surely, the moment was coming. It never came the way it was supposed to. There were dead, yes. War is war, and the dead were real, and I have their names still. But the humans would not let the dying become a mountain. They kept it a hill, and then they did something I could not have imagined. When the last engagement ended and our fleet sat broken but mostly alive in orbit, and the king finally, wearily, gave the signal to seal the rite, I stepped forward with the scroll unrolling in my hands. And Field Administrator Tomas Herrera, standing at the human commander's shoulder, raised one open palm and said, "Not yet. There's something you need to see first." Part 6. I will tell you about the 3 times now. The 3 times I tried to read the tally and close the war, and the 3 times a human, very gently, stopped me. I have thought about these 3 moments more than I have thought about anything else in my long life. The first time I unrolled the scroll in the ruined town square of a place called Hollow Bridge, with the king beside me growing impatient to be done and gone, and Administrator Herrera lifted his hand and walked us instead into a field hospital. It was full of the wounded. Not our wounded, though some of ours were there too, tended exactly as carefully as the rest, which I could not understand. It was full of theirs, farmers with burns, a boy with a crushed arm. An old woman, Margaret Cole her name was, who had lost her husband and her barn and her hands had not stopped shaking since, and who looked up at the king, and did not curse him, only asked him very simply why. The king had no answer. Reckoners are trained to answer everything. I had no answer either. I rolled the scroll back up. The second time I tried in the orbital staging yard, with the fleet repaired enough to leave, and I had the closing words actually in my mouth. The medic, Priya Nair, stopped me this time. She did not raise a hand. She just walked the king down a long line of people. A refugee line, hundreds of them, families from the burned terraces, standing in the cold with everything they owned in bags at their feet, and she said nothing at all, only walked slowly, so the king had to walk slowly too, so he had to pass close enough to see every single face. It took an hour. It was the longest hour of the king's life. I know because I walked it beside him with the scroll under my arm, unread, useless, heavy as a stone. The third time I did not even get the scroll fully open. They took us, the king and his heir and me, to the edge of a field outside Hollow Bridge where humans were digging a long trench in the cold earth, and laying their dead in it in rows, wrapped in plain cloth, while other humans stood and watched and wept and did not look away, because Herrera told us quietly looking away was the one thing they would not do. "We bury our own where the people who killed them can see it," he said, "not as punishment. So it's true, so it happened, so nobody gets to pretend it didn't." And I understood, standing at the edge of that trench with my closing right dying unspoken in my throat for the third time, that the humans had a whole vast machinery of aftermath, hospitals and refugee lines and burial trenches and shaking-handed widows, and that our entire civilization, in 4,000 glorious years, had built no such thing at all. We had only ever built the door. We had never once made anyone stay in the room. Part 7. So they built the king a chair. I want you to picture it, because it was the most terrible throne I have ever seen, and it was a plain wooden chair from a farmhouse kitchen, set down in the middle of the ruined square of Hollow Bridge, in the cold, in the open, with the burned beams of the town standing around it like broken teeth. Commander Adami asked the king to sit in it. Not as a prisoner, they made that very clear, and it was the strangest thing of all that he was free to leave at any moment and somehow could not. She asked him to sit and to watch, just watch, while the town was rebuilt, while the dead were buried, while the living came back to the cracked terraces and began, slowly, with shaking hands, to plan again. The king refused. Of course he refused. He was a sovereign of the Vorhalu, and this was a violation of every form of war that had ever existed. He demanded that I read the tally at once so that the contract could be sealed and he could leave with his honor. He commanded it. I had never in my life disobeyed a royal command, and I lifted the scroll to obey. And Ruth Adami looked at me, the reckoner, the keeper of the door, and she said the words I will hear in the dark for as long as I live. "You count the dead so you can stop thinking about them," she said. "That's what the scroll is for. You read the names and then you get to leave them behind. That's the trick. That's the whole trick." She shook her head slowly, and it was not cruelty in her face. It was something far worse. It was pity. "We don't do it that way. We make you stay. We make you see what the number was actually made of." She nodded at the chair. "So sit. And when you've sat long enough that the names stop being a number, then you can read them. Not before." The king did not sit that day, or the next. But there was nowhere to go that was not the aftermath. Every direction he turned, humans were carrying the wounded, or burying the dead, or rebuilding the burned, and they let him watch all of it. And they never once stopped him. And there was no door anywhere, because the humans had taken the door away. On the 9th day, King Bzl of the Vorhalu sat down in the farmhouse chair in the ruined square of Hollow Bridge. And a human child, a small boy named Daniel, whose mother was in the burial trench outside town, walked up to the great alien king in his cracked ceremonial array, and stood in front of him, and looked at him for a long time with no fear at all, and then simply sat down in the dirt at his feet and stayed there, watching the same ruin the king was watching, the way a child sits with anyone who is too sad to be left alone. The king began to weep. I had served him for 40 years and I had never seen it. He wept, and the boy Daniel sat with him, and the scroll hung at my side unread, and I finally understood the trap that had closed around us the moment we sang our beautiful old war song into that silence and got no song in return. Part 8. This is the thesis of my whole life, and I have earned the right to state it plainly, because I am the one who carried the scroll that was never read. We thought war was the killing. The humans knew that the killing was the easy part. We thought the strength of a people was in the blow they could strike. The humans had a deeper and far more terrible strength, and it was this: they could make you stay for what the blow did. They had no fortress that could stop our fleet. They had something our fleet had never once encountered in 4,000 years of glory, a refusal to let the war close. For us, the tally was mercy. I see that now. The reading of the names was how we forgave ourselves. We counted the dead precisely so that we could be finished with them, so that the door could shut, so that no king ever had to sit in a chair in the cold and learn that the number on the scroll was made of a widow named Margaret and a boy named Daniel and a long trench full of people who had been alive the week before. The tally was not honor. The tally was escape. And the humans, who fought to spare and not to slaughter, who treated the enemies they wounded and buried their dead in the open so no one could pretend, had built their entire way of war around denying us that escape. They did not beat King Bzl. A defeated king goes home angry and plans the next war. They did something for which there is no recovery and no rematch. They made him witness, and a king who has truly witnessed cannot declare again. The boy in the dirt at his feet had done what no fleet in the galaxy could do. That is the human weapon, not the gun, not the ship, the chair and the trench and the refusal to read the tally until the names stop being a number. They are the species that closes the door behind you and stands in front of it and says, gently, with terrible pity in their tired eyes, "Not yet. Stay. Look. It's not finished until you've actually seen what you did." Part 9. We went home at last. They let us. They had never been keeping us by force, which is the part I still cannot fully hold in my mind, that the strongest cage I have ever been in had no bars at all, only the steady refusal of a few tired people to let us pretend. King Bzl never declared another war. He lived 11 more years, and in all of them I never once read a tally aloud, because there were no more wars to seal. He spent those years quietly, and he had the farmhouse chair brought back with us and kept in his private chambers, which scandalized the court, and which I understood completely. On the day he died, he asked for only one thing, and it was for me to come, and to bring the scroll of Tessely Reach, the one I never read. I brought it. He asked me to read it then, finally, after all those years. And I unrolled it and I read every name, ours and theirs, slowly, the way the humans had taught me without ever meaning to teach me anything, not as a number to be finished with, but as people to be sat with. It took most of a day. The king listened to everyone, and when I had read the last name he nodded and closed his eyes and said the war was over now, properly over, the real end, and he was right, and he died. Within a generation the Vorhalu war right was gone. Not banned with any great decree, it simply stopped. The young no longer wished to declare. The old no longer wished to answer. The beautiful 4,000-year machine of clean, sealed, escapable war fell silent, and what filled the silence slowly was a thing we learned late and badly and are still learning: how to stay, how to look, how to count the dead in a way that does not let you leave them behind. I am very old now, and I am leaving this on the record because a reckoner does not look away, and because I want it known what truly defeated us. It was not their fleet, because their fleet was smaller. It was not their courage, though they had it. It was one quiet condition spoken in a field of cut wheat by a woman named Ruth Adami, who looked at my scroll and saw it for exactly what it was. War for everyone else in the galaxy is a game with an ending you are allowed to walk away from. The humans are the only people I have ever met who will not let you walk away. They make you stay for the aftermath. They sit a child in the dirt at your feet, and they wait with terrible patience until the names on the scroll stop being a number. And only then, when it is far too late to ever be the same again, do they let you read it. Bring your king, they said. I understand now why.